The Mekong is a transboundary river in Southeast Asia. It is the world's 12th longest river and the 7th longest in Asia. Its estimated length is 4,350 kilometers, and it drains an area of 795,000 square kilometers, discharging 457 cubic kilometers of water annually. From the Tibetan Plateau, the river runs through China's Yunnan Province, Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam. In 1995, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam established the Mekong River Commission to assist in the management and coordinated use of the Mekong's resources. In 1996, China and Burma became dialogue partners of the MRC, and the 6 countries now work together within a cooperative framework. The extreme seasonal variations in flow and the presence of rapids and waterfalls in the Mekong make navigation difficult. Even so, the river is a major trade route between Western China and Southeast Asia. Names. In English, the river is called the Mekong River, derived from Mae Nam Kong, a term of both Thai and Lao origin. In the Lao Thai toponymy, rivers translates to mother of water, signaled by the prefix Mae, meaning mother, and Nam, for water. In the Mekong's case, Mae Nam Kong means Kong, the mother of water. Many northern Thai and Laos locals refer to it as the River Kong. Such is the case with the Mae Nam Ping in Chiang Mai, which is known as the Ping River. The Tonle Sap in Cambodia is a similar example, where Tonle translates as Great Lake or Great River, making the Tonle Sap River an unnecessary repetition of what is in fact the Sap River. In Khmer language, Mekong means mother of water, translated as Emi acute, mother, and Konk for Konki, water. Since the river flows through a number of countries, it has many different names in local languages. Burmese, IPA, MJ, Chinese, Riverhead, and Zaqu, upper reaches, Langkang Jiang, middle and lower reaches, Megong He acute, Khmer, Mekong, Mekong, Tonle Mekong, Tian Li Mekong, Tonle Thum, Tian Li Tiom, Lao, Mnarmkn, Narmkn, Thai, Mnarmkon, Tibetan, Wylie, Rdzachu, Zypy, Zaqu, Vietnamese, Song Mekong, Song Lon, Song Siu Long, course. The Mekong rises as the Zaqu and soon becomes known as the Langkang in the Three Rivers Source Area, on the Tibetan Plateau in the Sanjiang Yuan National Nature Reserve. The reserve protects the headwaters of, from north to south, the Yellow, the Mekong, and the Yangtze rivers. It flows through the Tibetan Autonomous Region and then southeast into Yunnan Province, and then through the 3 parallel rivers area in the Hengduan Mountains, along with the Yangtze to its east and the Salween River to its west. The Mekong then meets the tripoint of China, Burma and Laos. From there it flows southwest and forms the border of Burma and Laos for about 100 kilometers until it arrives at the tripoint of Burma, Laos, and Thailand. This is also the point of confluence between the Ruik River and the Mekong. The area of this tripoint is sometimes termed the Golden Triangle, although the term also refers to the much larger area of those 3 countries that is notorious as a drug-producing region. From the Golden Triangle tripoint, the Mekong turns southeast to briefly form the border of Laos with Thailand. It then turns east into the interior of Laos, flowing first east and then south for some 400 kilometers before meeting the border with Thailand again. Once more, it defines the Laos-Thailand border for some 850 kilometers as it flows first east, passing in front of the capital of Laos, Vientiane, then turns south. A second time, the river leaves the border and flows east into Laos, soon passing the city of Paxi. Thereafter, it turns and runs more or less directly south, crossing into Cambodia. At Phnom Penh, the river is joined on the right bank by the river and lake system the Tonle Sap, When the Mekong is low, the Tonle Sap is a tributary. Water flows from the lake and river into the Mekong. When the Mekong floods, the flow reverses. The floodwaters of the Mekong flow up the Tonle Sap. Immediately after the Sap River joins the Mekong by Phnom Penh, the Basin River branches off the right bank. The Basin River is the first and main distributary of the Mekong, thus, this is the beginning of the Mekong Delta. The two rivers, the Basin to the west and the Mekong to the east, enter Vietnam very soon after this. In Vietnam, the Basin is called the Hao River. The main, eastern, branch of the Mekong is called the Tien River or Tien Giang. In Vietnam, distributaries of the eastern branch include the My Tho River, the Ba Lai River, the Ham Luang River, and the Si Chen River. Drainage basin. The Mekong Basin can be divided into two parts. The Upper Mekong Basin, in Tibet-China, and the Lower Mekong Basin, from Yunnan downstream from China to the South China Sea. From the point where it rises to its mouth, the most precipitous drop in the Mekong occurs in Upper Mekong Basin, a stretch of some 2,200 kilometers. Here, it drops 4,500 meters before it enters the lower basin where the borders of Thailand, Laos, China and Burma come together in the Golden Triangle. Downstream from the Golden Triangle, the river flows for a further 2,600 kilometers through Laos, Thailand and Cambodia before entering the South China Sea via a complex delta system in Vietnam. Upper Basin. The Upper Basin makes up 24% of the total area and contributes 15 to 20% of the water that flows into the Mekong River. The catchment here is steep and narrow. Soil erosion has been a major problem and approximately 50% of the sediment in the river comes from the Upper Basin. In Yunnan Province in China, the river and its tributaries are confined by narrow, deep gorges. The tributary river systems in this part of the basin are small. Only 14 have catchment areas that exceed 1,000 square kilometers. Yet the greatest amount of loss of forest cover in the entire river system per square kilometer has occurred in this region due to heavy unchecked demand for natural resources. In the south of Yunnan, in Simao and Xishuangbanna prefectures, the river changes as the valley opens out, the floodplain becomes wider, and the river becomes wider and slower. Lower basin. Major tributary systems develop in the lower basin. These systems can be separated into two groups: tributaries that contribute to the major wet season flows, and tributaries that drain low-relief regions of lower rainfall. The first group are left-bank tributaries that drain the high rainfall areas of Lao Pdr. The second group are those on the right bank, mainly the Mun and Kai rivers, that drain a large part of northeast Thailand. Laos lies almost entirely within the lower Mekong Basin. Its climate, landscape and land use are the major factors shaping the hydrology of the river. The mountainous landscape means that only 16% of the country is farmed under lowland terrace or upland shifting cultivation. With upland shifting agriculture, soils recover within 10 to 20 years, but the vegetation does not. Shifting cultivation is common in the uplands of northern Laos and is reported to account for as much as 27% of the total land under rice cultivation. As elsewhere in the basin, forest cover has been steadily reduced during the last 3 decades by shifting agriculture and permanent agriculture. The cumulative impacts of these activities on the river regime have not been measured. However, the hydrological impacts of land cover changes induced by the Vietnam War were quantified in 2 subcatchments of the lower Mekong River Basin. Loss of forest cover in the Thai areas of the lower basin has been the highest in all the lower Mekong countries over the past 60 years. On the Korat Plateau, which includes the Mun and Kai tributary systems, forest cover was reduced from 42% in 1961 to 13% in 1993. Although this part of northeast Thailand has an annual rainfall of more than 1,000 millimeters, A high evaporation rate means it is classified as a semi-arid region. Consequently, although the Mun and Kai basins drain 15% of the entire Mekong basin, they only contribute 6% of the average annual flow. Sandy and saline soils are the most common soil types, which makes much of the land unsuitable for wet rice cultivation. In spite of poor fertility, however, agriculture is intensive. Glutinous rice, maize and cassava are the principal crops. Drought is by far the major hydrological hazard in this region. As the Mekong enters Cambodia, over 95% of the flows have already joined the river. From here on downstream, the terrain is flat and water levels rather than flow volumes determine the movement of water across the landscape. The seasonal cycle of changing water levels at Phnom Penh results in the unique flow reversal of water into and out of the Great Lake via the Tonle Sap River. Phnom Penh also marks the beginning of the delta system of the Mekong River. Here the main stream begins to break up into an increasing number of branches. In Cambodia, wet rice is the main crop and is grown on the floodplains of the Tonle Sap, Mekong, and Basin rivers. More than half of Cambodia remains covered with mixed evergreen and deciduous broadleaf forest, but forest cover has decreased from 73% in 1973 to 63% in 1993. Here, the river landscape is flat. Small changes in water level determine the direction of water movement, including the large-scale reversal of flow into and out of the Tonle Sap Basin from the Mekong River. The Mekong Delta in Vietnam is farmed intensively and has little natural vegetation left. Forest cover is less than 10%. In the central highlands of Vietnam, forest cover was reduced from over 95% in the 1950s to around 50% in the mid-1990s. Agricultural expansion and population pressure are the major reasons for land use and landscape change. Both drought and flood are common hazards in the delta, which many people believe is the most sensitive to upstream hydrological change. Water flow along its course. Table 1. Basic data on country share of Mekong Basin territory and water flows by taking into account hydrological regimes, physiography, land use, and existing, planned and potential resource developments. The Mekong is divided into 6 distinct reaches. Reach 1. Langkang-Jiang or Upper Mekong River in China. In this part of the river, the major source of water flowing into the river comes from melting snow on the Tibetan Plateau. This volume of water is sometimes called the Yunnan Component, and plays an important role in the low-flow hydrology of the lower mainstream. Even as far downstream as Croatia, the Yunnan Component makes up almost 30% of the average dry season flow. A major concern is that the ongoing and planned expansion of dams and reservoirs on the Mekong mainstream in Yunnan could have a significant effect on the low-flow regime of the lower Mekong Basin system. Reach 2. Chiang Santa Vientiane and Nong Khai. This reach is almost entirely mountainous and covered with natural forest, although there has been widespread slash-and-burn agriculture. Although this reach could hardly be described as unspoiled, the hydrological response is perhaps the most natural and undisturbed in all the lower basin. Many hydrological aspects of the lower basin start to change rapidly at the downstream boundary of this reach. Reach 3. Vientiane and Nong Khai to Pac C. The boundary between Reach 2 and 3 is where the Mekong hydrology starts to change. Reach 2 is dominated in both wet and dry seasons by the Yunnan Component. Reach 3 is increasingly influenced by contributions from the large left bank tributaries in Laos, namely the Nam Ngum, Nam Thien, Nam and Hinbaon, Shay Bang Phai, Shay Bang Hyang, and Shay Dun rivers. The Mun Khai River system from the right bank in Thailand enters the mainstream within this reach. Reach 4. Pac C to Croatia. The main hydrological contributions to the mainstream in this reach come from the Shay Kong, Shay San, and Sre Epoch catchments. Together, these rivers make up the largest hydrological subcomponent of the lower basin. Over 25% of the mean annual flow volume to the mainstream at Croatia comes from these three river basins. They are the key element in the hydrology of this part of the system, especially to the Tonle Sap flow reversal. Reach 5. Croatia to Phnom Penh. This reach includes the hydraulic complexities of the Cambodian floodplain, the Tonle Sap and the Great Lake. By this stage, over 95% of the total flow has entered the Mekong system. The focus turns from hydrology and water discharge to the assessment of water level, overbank storage in flooding and the hydrodynamics that determine the timing, duration and volume of the seasonal flow reversal into and out of the Great Lake. Reach 6. Phnom Penh to the South China Sea. Here the mainstream divides into a complex and increasingly controlled and artificial system of branches and canals. Key features of flow behavior are tidal influences and saltwater intrusion. Every year, 35 to 50% of this reach is flooded during the rainy season. The impact of road embankments and similar infrastructure developments on the movement of this floodwater is an increasingly important consequence of development. Table 2 summarizes the mean annual flows along the mainstream. The mean annual flow entering the lower Mekong from China is equivalent to a relatively modest 450 mm depth of runoff. The flow level falls again, even with the right bank entry of the Mun Kai system from Thailand. Although the Mun Kai Basin drains 20% of the lower system, average annual runoff is only 250 mm. Runoff in the mainstream increases again with the entry from the left bank of the Mekong from southern Laos and Khe San and Sr Epoch from Vietnam in Cambodia. Table 2. Lower Mekong mainstream annual flow at selected sites. Flows at Chiang San entering the lower basin from Yunnan make up about 15% of the wet season flow at Croatia. This rises to 40% during the dry season, even this far downstream. During the wet season, the proportion of average flow coming from Yunnan rapidly decreases downstream of Chiang San, from 70% to less than 20% at Croatia. The dry season contribution from Yunnan is much more significant. The major portion of the balance comes from Laos, which points to a major distinction in the low-flow hydrology of the river. One fraction comes from melting snow in China and Tibet and the rest from overseas and catchment storage in the lower basin. This has implications for the occurrence of drought conditions. For example, if runoff from melting snow in any given year is very low, then flows upstream of Vientiane Nong Khai would be lower. In a large river system like the Mekong, seasonal flows can be quite variable from year to year. Although the pattern of the annual hydrograph is fairly predictable, its magnitude is not. The average monthly flows along the mainstream are listed in Table 3, providing an indication of their range and variability from year to year. At Pack C, for example, flood season flows during August would exceed 20,000 cubic meters per second 9 years out of 10, but exceed 34,000 cubic meters per second only 1 year in 10. Table 3. Mekong mainstream monthly discharge 1960 to 2004. There is little evidence from the last 45 years of data of any systematic changes in the hydrological regime of the Mekong. River modifications. The Mekong is already heavily dammed, with many more dams planned and under construction. Natural history. The Mekong Basin is one of the richest areas of biodiversity in the world. Only the Amazon boasts a higher level of biodiversity. Biota estimates for the Greater Mekong subregion include 20,000 plant species, 430 mammals, 1,200 birds, 800 reptiles and amphibians, and an estimated 850 freshwater fish species. The most species richness orders among the freshwater fish in the river basin are cypriniforms and catfish. New species are regularly described from the Mekong. In 2009, 145 new species were described from the region, comprising 29 fish species previously unknown to science, 2 new bird species, 10 reptiles, 5 mammals, 96 plants and 6 new amphibians. The Mekong region contains 16 WWF Global 200 ecoregions, the greatest concentration of ecoregions in mainland Asia. No other river is home to so many species of very large fish. The biggest include 3 species of probarbus babs, which can grow up to 1.5 meters and weigh 70 kilograms, the giant freshwater stingray, which can have a length of up to 4.3 meters, the giant pangasius, giant barb and the endemic Mekong giant catfish. The last 3 can grow up to about 3 meters in length and weigh 300 kilograms. All of these are in serious decline, because of dams, flood control and overfishing. One species of freshwater dolphin, the Irrawaddy dolphin, was once common in the whole of the lower Mekong but is now very rare, with only 85 individuals remaining. Among other wetland mammals that have been living in and around the river are the smooth-coated otter and fishing cat. The endangered Siamese crocodile occurs in small isolated pockets within the northern Cambodian and Laotian portions of the Mekong River. The saltwater crocodile once ranged from the Mekong Delta up the river into Tonle Sap and beyond but is now extinct in the river, along with being extinct in all of Vietnam and possibly even Cambodia.